The desert shimmered under a sun that refused to yield, turning every shadow into a mirage and every heartbeat into an echo. Clara May Whitlock moved carefully through the brittle grass, her apron catching on the dry thorns that sprouted like warnings from the earth. Her bucket of water sloshed with each step, the cool weight of it promising a small mercy against the day's heat. Beyond her cabin, the plains stretched in aching silence, an ocean of dust and memory. She had lived alone here since her husband's death, her days a pattern of chores and quiet prayers, her nights filled with the murmurs of winds slipping through cracks in the wood. When the gunshot came, it cracked the stillness clean in half. The sound rolled over the hills, deep and final, like thunder that had lost its way. Clara froze, eyes fixed on the horizon, the bucket trembling in her grip. Then came another shot, farther off, followed by the distant pounding of hoofs. For a moment she stood there, pulse quickening, the old fear stirring, a fear that never truly left the frontier woman, only slept beneath her ribs. She set the bucket down and started toward the noise. She found him by the creek, half hidden among the reeds, a man slumped forward, blood soaking through his shoulder. His horse lay dead beside him, arrow still lodged in its flank. The man was young, his dark hair tangled, his skin bronze under the dirt and sweat. A small charm of carved bone hung from his neck, swaying with each shallow breath. Clara's first instinct was to back away. His moccasins, his beads, his face, all marked him as Comanche. Her late husband's killer had likely looked the same. But when the man's eyes opened, hazel glinting under the shadow of pain, she saw no threat there. Only a stubborn kind of life clinging to its edge. He tried to rise, and the sound he made, half growl, half groan, cut through her caution. Clara knelt beside him before she could think better of it. "Don't move," she whispered, voice dry as sand. He didn't understand the words, but her tone held something he did: mercy. Dragging him back to her cabin took the last of her strength. By the time she eased him onto the rough cot in the barn, the sun had melted into crimson and violet. She tore strips from an old bedsheet, pressing them to his wound. The bullet had gone clean through, luck or providence, she couldn't tell which. His skin burned with fever. She fetched the whiskey, poured it over the wound, and when he jerked and hissed, she murmured softly, "You'll live, stranger. God help us both." That night the storm came. Wind rattled the shutters, rain spattered the roof, and lightning bled white through the cracks of the barn. Clara sat in a chair beside him, oil lamp flickering, watching the rain run down his skin. Each drop left a trail of light. His lips moved in a language she didn't know, perhaps a prayer, perhaps a name. When he finally slept, she stared at his face and tried to hate him. She couldn't. By dawn, the world smelled of wet dust and ash. Clara was feeding the chickens when she saw riders approaching, 5 men, their silhouettes dark against the pale sky. The posse. She knew the sheriff's shape before she saw his face. Sheriff Doyle was a man carved from iron and suspicion. He reined in his horse before her porch. "Morning, Miss Whitlock," he said, eyes scanning the yard. "We're tracking a Comanche. Shot one of our men out by the ridge. You seen anything?" Her heart thudded. Behind her, the barn door was shut but not locked. The air seemed too still. "Nothing," she said. "Just the storm last night." Doyle's gaze lingered on her longer than it should have. "If you see him," he said, "you'd best tell us. Folks won't take kindly to harboring the enemy." When they rode off, their dust hung in the air like guilt. Clara stood there until it settled, her hands clenched around her apron. Then she went to the barn. The man, Tayan, she would later learn his name, was awake, eyes watchful. He'd heard it all. Their silence was heavy, but there was understanding in it. He knew she'd lied for him. Days slipped by in cautious rhythm. He healed slowly, his strength returning in small degrees. He spoke little, but his gratitude lived in his gestures, the way he fixed her broken fence, the careful way he handled her tools. Sometimes, as the sun went down, he would draw in the dirt with a stick, circles and lines, figures of horses and rivers. When she pointed, asking, he smiled faintly and said one word: "Home." In those moments, Clara felt something inside her loosen, like a knot she'd carried for years beginning to untie itself. Her fear didn't vanish, but it shifted, became something gentler, almost reverent. She caught herself watching him work, the precision of his hands, the quiet grace of his movements. It unnerved her, how much she wanted him to stay. One night, as another storm gathered far off, she found him standing outside the cabin, looking toward the horizon. The wind tangled his hair, carrying the scent of rain. "They'll come for you again," she said softly. He looked at her, then up at the bruised sky, and for the first time spoke her name. "Clara." Just that, nothing more. But it was enough to make her throat tighten. She turned away, pretending to check the lamp, pretending not to tremble. When she looked back, lightning flashed, and for an instant she thought she saw movement along the ridge, dark shapes on horseback, too still to be tricks of light. Her pulse quickened. Tayan's hand went to the knife at his belt. The storm wind rose, carrying the low, distant beat of drums. And in that breathless moment before the rain began, Clara realized mercy had bought her more than silence. It had brought the whole world to her door. Dawn crept across the plains like a held breath, pale and trembling. Clara stood on her porch, clutching the shawl around her shoulders, the chill biting through the cotton. The horizon glowed faintly, a thin band of rose light over the ridge where Tayan's gaze had been fixed the night before. The silence felt heavier than usual, the kind that listens back. She could sense something moving beyond sight, an unseen weight pressing against the fragile calm. When the first echo of hooves reached her ears, she didn't flinch. Some part of her had known this would come. They appeared through the rising dust, riders cresting the hill, sun glinting on spearheads and beads. A dozen, then two, then more, until the ridge was lined with Comanche warriors, their horses breathing mist into the cool air. Their faces were painted in earth tones, eyes like carved obsidian, unreadable. Tayan stood in the doorway behind her, shoulders squared, jaw set. "My people," he said quietly. The words carried no triumph, only gravity. Clara's heartbeat slowed until she could feel each thud like a knock on wood. She stepped forward, her bare feet sinking into the cold soil. The air shimmered between her and the approaching riders. They stopped a few yards away, the leader dismounting, an older man, tall, wrapped in a cloak of woven hide, his gaze sharp as the edge of flint. Tayan went to meet him, speaking in low tones, their language rising and falling like wind through grass. Clara could not understand, but she caught the tension in every gesture, the accusation in the chief's eyes, the urgency in Tayan's voice. Her name broke through the foreign rhythm, harsh in the chief's mouth. Tayan turned toward her, his expression unreadable, and said, "They think you betrayed me." The words fell between them like a dropped blade. Clara blinked, then shook her head, too stunned to answer. "Betrayed?" she repeated. "I hid you. I lied to the sheriff." "Posse came again," Tayan interrupted softly. "Someone told them where to look. They say only you knew." His tone was calm, but the faint tremor beneath it was enough to crack something inside her. The chief spoke again, voice deep and commanding. Tayan translated, each phrase cutting deeper. "They want to see if your mercy was a trap." Clara stepped closer, her voice trembling but steady. "I saved you because I couldn't stand to watch another man die on this cursed land. That's all the truth I have." She unpinned the shawl from her shoulders and dropped it to the dirt, lifting her chin. "If that's a sin, let your God and mine decide." The chief studied her in silence. Wind stirred the edges of his cloak. Then Tayan spoke again, faster now, his voice raw, pleading in a tongue that needed no translation. The old man's expression softened slightly, his eyes flicking toward the wounded shoulder that still bore Clara's careful stitches. After a long pause, he gave a slow nod. The tension in the air thinned, but not completely. A hawk's cry split the sky. On the far side of the valley, movement shimmered through the dust, riders approaching fast, sunlight flashing on rifles. Clara's stomach twisted. The posse. Sheriff Doyle's men, drawn by rumor or fate. She turned to Tayan, and for a moment they simply looked at each other, two souls caught in the middle of history's cruel machinery. The Comanche mounted again, bracing as the white riders came into view. Doyle shouted before his horse even stopped, gun raised high. "Step aside, Clara! We'll finish what we started." She moved without thinking, stepping forward into the open space between the two groups. "No," she said, her voice carrying sharper than she thought possible. "Not one more death on this land." The air stilled. Dust swirled between them like smoke from an unseen fire. Tayan rode forward, stopping beside her. He said something in his language. Clara didn't need to understand the words. Their meaning pulsed in the air around them, something like enough. Doyle's grip on his revolver faltered. His eyes darted from Tayan to Clara, and for a moment, the old hatred in him seemed to waver. Behind him, his men shifted uneasily, the weight of mourning pressing down on them all. Then, slowly, the sheriff lowered his gun. The sound of it clicking back into its holster was louder than the thunder that followed. The tension broke like glass. One by one, the posse turned their horses, retreating into the distance. The Comanche riders remained still, watching until the dust faded. When silence returned, it was softer this time, almost gentle. Tayan looked at Clara, the faintest trace of a smile ghosting his face. "You changed the wind," he murmured. She shook her head, tears burning behind her eyes. "No," she whispered. "I just refuse to breathe its hate." The chief dismounted again, walked to her, and placed something small and carved into her palm, a pendant of bone, worn smooth by age. A token, or perhaps forgiveness. Without a word, he turned back to his people. As the warriors rode away into the gold of the rising sun, Clara stood in the doorway, pendant clenched tight, watching the dust swallow them. The morning wind carried the faint rhythm of hooves long after they were gone, like the echo of a heartbeat she could no longer forget. Then, in the distant stillness, another sound rose, low, steady, and unfamiliar. She turned her face toward it, realizing it wasn't thunder. It was drums.